This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Monday, November 30th. This is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. We begin our broadcast in Nigeria, where villagers in northeast state of Borno on Sunday buried 43 farmers killed in an attack by suspected Islamist militants. Meanwhile, security forces continue searching for dozens of people who are still missing. Roughly 30 of the men killed were also beheaded in the attack, which began on Saturday morning in Zabarmari village in northeast Borno state. Residents said a total of 70 people are feared dead. While no group claimed responsibility, such massacres have been carried out in the past by Boko Haram or the Islamic State West Africa province. They are both active in the region, where Islamic militants have killed at least 30,000 people in the past decade. President Muhammadu Buhari condemned the killings, saying the entire country is hurt. Zabarmari, dozens of mourners surrounded the bodies, which were wrapped in white burial shrouds and placed on wooden pallets as clerics led prayers for the deceased. Turning to the Horn of Africa, where the leader of rebel forces in northern Ethiopia, Debretsion, Gebremichael, said on Monday they were still fighting near the regional capital of Mekelle, which fell to government troops at the weekend. Gebremichael's text message to Reuters was dismissed by the government as a deluded claim. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's federal forces took Mekelle at the weekend with relatively little resistance. Meanwhile, the head of the United Nations Refugee Agency, Filippo Grandi, said on Sunday he hoped humanitarian access to Ethiopia's northern Tigray region would be granted soon by the Ethiopian authorities. Grandi told an online news conference from the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, that UNHCR had appealed to donors for $147 million, which would be enough to cover the needs of 100,000 people for a period of 6 months. Thousands of people are believed to have been killed, and nearly 44,000 have fled to Sudan since the fighting in Tigray region began in November 4th. Details about the situation on the conflict zone have been difficult to obtain, as phone and internet links to Tigray have been down and access tightly controlled since fighting began. Let's now turn to the global COVID-19 pandemic. Being intubated and laying on a bed for weeks without properly moving, eating, or speaking has left many scarred. Some lasting effects from the coronavirus, including fatigue, shortness of breath, muscle pain, headaches, poor balance, and memory loss. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more.
Many people who had serious cases of COVID-19 are dealing with its long-term effects months after leaving the hospital. In Barcelona, 56-year-old Pablo Aguilar is one of them. He spent 3 months at the hospital, 1 month in the ICU. It's been 5 months since he left the hospital.
The truth is I am surprised because I thought that at this point I would be walking better. The long-term effects that have remained, they are tremendous. I get tired. I have become afraid of going out in the street alone. I have a small dog. Taking the dog out I considered a big responsibility. I don't care.
Aguilar is part of a group of COVID-19 survivors participating in a rehabilitation program in a Barcelona public hospital. Activities include exercises to strengthen muscle, improve balance, and aerobic capacity. Another participant, Eulalia Canela, a mother of 2 and a 49-year-old nurse, got infected while taking care of virus patients. She was never hospitalized but suffered from pneumonia and was bedridden at home for a month. In the summer, she thought she was getting better but noticed new symptoms popping up: hair loss, numbness in the hands, and muscle pain. Not a day goes by without a headache, she says. Recently, doctors discovered her lungs weren't working properly, hence affecting her kidneys.
Your active time reduces itself to 3 or 4 hours a day. The rest of the time you must be on the sofa stretched out or resting. Dinner time comes and you must tell your kids, make yourself whatever you can because mother cannot get up from the sofa.
Dr. Esther Marker oversees the rehabilitation programs Canela is part of. She also had COVID-19 in the spring, but unlike her patients, recovered quickly and is now back at work.
We have two big groups of patients who are untrained from being in the ICU, for example, who get tired and have muscular pain and can feel like they're running out of breath even when they're resting. And then you have another profile of patients who have difficulty swallowing or difficulty speaking.
Marco estimates some 15 to 20% of COVID-19 patients who were hospitalized will end up needing serious rehabilitation. Spain has the 6th highest number of coronavirus cases in the world, with more than 1.5 million people infected since the beginning of the pandemic. Mariama Diallo, VOA News.
As Kenya sees a jump in confirmed cases of COVID-19, the country's colorful public transport buses called matatus have launched a registration system in the capital for passenger contact tracing. If a rider tests positive for the virus, other commuters will get an alert that they should go for testing. Ruth Emeldorp reports from Nairobi.
Matatus, or minibuses, are a part of Nairobi's street culture, but also, due to cramped quarters, a spreader of COVID-19.
We are worried because sooner or later that infection rate will go beyond expectation, and it also boils down to our clients, who are the commuters, who are the working class, who are the informal sector.
To combat the problem, Kenya's Matatu Welfare Association in November introduced a contact tracing application in the capital. The app works by asking passengers to register as having boarded a particular Matatu at a particular time.
The idea is very noble because, you know, when you're traveling, you won't know who has the virus or not. So at least with the registration, we'll be able to follow up and follow they're called what? The people who you are with contacts with.
The data is managed by a Kenya government-certified IT company. If a passenger later reports testing positive, the other riders will receive an alert. But there are limitations. Reporting an infection is voluntary.
If it is the other way around of enforcement, some people may try to beat the system or to just resist being coerced into certain things. We will not be able to achieve the goal. When we change their mindset, they'll be able to take up that as personal responsibility.
Kenya's health sector providers say contact tracing is critical for preventing COVID-19.
So even when you find the contact and you ask them to quarantine, you will not have 100% compliance with the quarantine. But even if you achieve 50% compliance with the quarantine, already you are actually contributing to reducing the spread and the force of the pandemic.
Kenya's National Transport and Safety Authority, NTSA, a partner on the contact tracing program, says if helpful in Nairobi, they will expand it.
Any effort by any entity that would help minimize the spread and the deaths will be embraced. So yes, if it is something that we can work with, we will promote it both in Nairobi and the other cities.
As Kenya navigates a second wave of COVID-19 cases, millions of Matatu riders can help beat the virus, one ride at a time. Ruth Emeldorp for VOA News, Nairobi.
For more than a year, the Cambodian government has been rounding up supporters of the banned Cambodian National Rescue Party and charging them with treason amid tight security and chaotic scenes. 129 of them appeared Thursday before the Phnom Penh Municipal Court, although their trials have now been put off until early next year. Luke Hunt reports from the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh.
The trial follows a failed bid by Cambodian National Rescue Party leader in exile, Sam Rainsy, to enter Cambodia last November and lead a popular uprising across the country promising to arrest Prime Minister Hun Sen and end this country's one-party rule. Among those charged with treason is Thierry Seng, a prominent political activist who spoke with VOA shortly before the proceedings got underway.
Hun Sen and his cronies are afraid of Sam Rainsy returning to continue to do politics in Cambodia. So the first attempt, which saw a lot of international support, occurred in November 2019. I was involved with the Nine Finger campaign, and as you may remember, Hun Sen threatened anyone who showed the Nine Finger with cutting them off, and so it only made me want to advocate the return some more, which I did at every instance.
The Nine Finger gesture represents November 9, Independence Day here, and the day Sam Rainsy promised to return from France. It became a popular salute among his supporters. Now, many of them could face jail terms of up to 12 years. Sapip Chak, the executive director of the Cambodian Centre for Human Rights, says Cambodian laws are being used to silence critics.
The problem, like you end up in jail simply because of your activism, and at the end, you would also been convicted at certain point with a suspended sentence. That is a common scenario we have seen, and that is somehow a kind of expected fate for any activist in Cambodia.
The CNRP came close to winning the popular vote in elections in 2013. Sam Rainsy refused to accept the result, and widespread protests followed. His party was subsequently banned, and Hun Sen's Cambodian People's Party won every seat contested at polls in 2018. Since then, protests have been rare, but union leaders, journalists, NGO staffers, and even people protesting land grabs are also before the courts. Atit Kong, Vice President of the Coalition of Cambodian Apparel Workers Democratic Union, urged the government to reconsider its attitude to critics.
The government should consider and also provide more free space for the people to exercise their rights.
Thierry Seng, who is also a US-trained lawyer, says rounding up civil society leaders had made it easier for the government to arrest remaining CNRP supporters.
I think they're charging me now because there are no civil society leaders or union leaders who could help mobilize, because these leaders are either detained or they're exiled. And we, as you know, we have no opposition party, we have no opposition leader, we have very limited free press. So it's opportunistic in their charge of me at this moment in time. The charges are serious.
Due to the sheer numbers and chaotic scenes at the court, the judges have divided the 129 into two separate trials, which will be heard in January and March next year. Meanwhile, just last month, Sam Rainsy said he would make another attempt at returning to Cambodia, but would not say how or when. That won't sit well with the government and should raise further concerns among those who support him. Luke Hunt for VOA News, Phnom Penh, Cambodia.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Still to come, U.S. President-elect Joe Biden plans to create a COVID-19 task force as incumbent President Donald Trump continues to press the case of voting irregularities. We'll be right back.
Hello, welcome to Straight Talk Africa, live from the Voice of America headquarters here in Washington. I am Shaka Sali. Straight Talk Africa, we call it like it is. We discuss issues that reflect the interests of our audience without fear or favor. We are guided by facts, and I look at myself as a servant of nothing but the truth.
Welcome back to Africa 54. President Donald Trump continues to press the case of voting irregularities in the U.S. presidential election, while former Vice President Joe Biden, whom VOA projects is the election winner, says he will create a COVID-19 task force this week. VOA's Michelle Quinn reports.
Many Americans returned to work this week after taking time off for Thursday's Thanksgiving holiday. While many people chose to stay home for the holiday, others traveled and gathered with loved ones. Health officials and elected leaders are worried that may prompt greater spread of the coronavirus. With more than 4 million cases reported in the United States in November, double October's count, there could be a surge on top of the current surge, said Dr. Anthony Fauci, director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases.
And we don't want to frighten people, but that's just the reality. We said that these things would happen as we got into the cold weather and as we began traveling, and they've happened. It's going to happen again.
Facing an increase in cases, Los Angeles County, the nation's most populated, ordered new shutdown measures, including a 3-week stay-at-home order beginning this week. In its final stretch of the regular season, the National Football League has ordered team facilities closed for in-person activities. But New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio announced elementary schools would open, reversing an earlier decision. Officials have been criticized throughout the U.S. for allowing indoor dining and for bars to remain open while schools are closed. Medical experts have noted that young children don't spread the virus like adults do.
So let's try to get the kids back, but let's try to mitigate the things that maintain and just push the kind of community spread that we're trying to avoid. And those are the things that you know well. The bars, the restaurants where you have capacity seating indoors without masks. Those are the things that drive the community spread, not the schools.
With hope of a vaccination on the horizon, Fauci and other public health officials are urging the public to continue with safety procedures, wearing masks, avoiding crowds, keeping a physical distance from others. U.S. advisors chosen by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention are meeting this week to decide how to distribute initial supplies of a vaccine once one receives government approval. Michelle Quinn, VOA News.
China used to be the world's biggest buyer of recycled materials around the world, but that stopped in 2018 when the country banned importing recycled plastics and other scrap materials, forcing the United States and many other countries to look for a new alternative. VOA's Keith Kosinski has more from New York.
New York City's 8 million residents are known for staying busy, but with the abundance of people comes plenty of waste and the need to recycle.
Compliance is a big challenge, and in a city as diverse as New York, it's always been a challenge.
New York City produces 12,000 tons of waste each day, but manages to recycle just 17% of it. Without China to haul the scrap away, recycling can become too expensive.
There's no city in the United States that is winning with recycling right now. Turns out that it's become a money loser for municipalities around the country, and in the past they'd actually been shipping it abroad to be dumped.
In the past, companies that recycle plastic, paper, glass, and metal would pay municipalities for their trash. More recently, the cities started paying the companies to pick up their material, sometimes hauling the trash far away before dumping it, worsening its environmental footprint. Now both municipalities and business owners have started to adapt. This new facility, 1 hour south of New York City, hopes to divert more trash through its doors.
When things get handled many times and there's a lot of waste in the stream, it becomes more costly for the community to recycle.
The building with state-of-the-art optical sorters, screening, and sizing means less wasted labor and material.
We project a savings to the taxpayers and the municipalities of Monmouth County of over $2 million in our first year.
But municipal solid waste accounts for no more than 3% of the nation's waste stream. Experts say making headway in recycling more agricultural, industrial, and electronic waste could require more investment from the companies that manufacture the products.
If corporate powers were willing to take responsibility for the end result of the materials that they put into the marketplace, so that their relationship to the market and to us as consumers would be more of a circular model instead of a linear model, that would be a really big step.
If we aren't focusing on leaving the world either equal to when we started or better, then we are not doing a service to our children and future generations.
Local governments are still adjusting to the loss of China as the country's preferred recycler. But experts say they expect a renaissance of recycling in the coming years, with new policies and technological advances that turn more trash into a useful resource. Keith Kosinski for VOA News, New York.
One of the interesting positives of the COVID pandemic is the explosion in outdoor biking. VOA's Ruken Isaac reports on a bike group of young kids in the U.S. state of Maryland in this report narrated by Bejan Hamdard.
Routine activities take on special significance during COVID, whether it's a long walk in the park or small and very distant casual gatherings. In a neighborhood just outside of Washington, D.C., a handful of kids started riding their bicycles together, and over time, it became a bike club.
We were all pretty much bored with COVID because we couldn't do many things. We would just come outside and play and bike around, and then eventually more and more kids, some joined us from up the street, and then more and more kids came, and then we started a biking team because it's one thing that we all share in common.
It's fun to come outside because you can just like all your friends are out, and it's just you can always talk. There's always something to talk about with everyone here, and all of us get along.
They call themselves Franklin Park Falcons. The group simply rides bikes together with social distancing in mind. Parents who mostly work from home because of the pandemic are thrilled that their children are using their times in a healthy manner and providing them with a much-needed break at home.
I work from home full-time, so does my husband, so getting the kids outside during the pandemic with their friends and biking and social distancing has been great. It's been occupying them, which has been huge.
But getting a bike these days is proving difficult. Bike sales in the U.S. have shot up over 75% from this time last year, according to retail research. Even fixing an old set of wheels is hard, as most bike shops are overwhelmed and out of inventory. Even finding a second-hand bike can be costly.
I went to the Trek store, and I think Gaithersburg, and I went to go find a bike, but they said they wouldn't have the right bike for me until October, and I was like, that's not great. So we went to another bike store, and we still couldn't find any bikes there. And then my dad had to go and find one secondhand online, and then we found somebody who was willing to sell it for $500 to us, and that's how I got my bike.
But for these kids in the Franklin Park Falcons having bikes, it means a bit of daily freedom and friendship during a time of lockdowns, Zoom classes, quarantine, and stress. And that's priceless. For Ruken Isaac in Maryland, Bejan Hamdard, VOA News.
This holiday season, the traditional visit with Santa Claus is going digital. Virtual visits with Santa Claus are being offered as a safer way for children to interact with Santa during the pandemic, as Tina Trin reports.
In a year filled with virtual happy hours and Zoom weddings, visits with Santa Claus are getting their own pandemic twist.
You get to do it from the safety, the comfort of your home. It's personalized.
Walt Geer and Sarah Blackman are the co-founders of Jingle Ring, an online platform that lets families visit virtually with Santa. Blackman says it's more than just a Zoom or Skype call with St. Nick.
There's pre-session entertainment where you get to meet some of Santa's family characters, and there's a countdown animation that builds excitement.
Services start at $25 for live video sessions that include a photo and recording, and go up to $50 at peak times like Christmas Day. Users can choose from a diverse cast of Santas and Mrs. Clauses with several language, cultural, and faith-based offerings.
Maybe they need American Sign Language or ASL in order for someone in the family to enjoy Claus. Maybe they have a child who has special needs.
The founders say the personalized experience has advantages over traditional in-person visits.
Now Santa magically knows the children's names, how old they are, what they want for Christmas. Maybe one of the parents has given Santa a virtual hint and says, hey, we wouldn't mind making sure the child knows we really appreciate them doing their homework this week.
This is the norm that I saw coming. It just took me by surprise. We got here a little earlier.
Dee Sinclair, who bills himself as the real Black Santa, prefers in-person visits, but admits there are a few perks to going online.
I get to sit in my home studio. I get to relax.
With a variety of virtual backgrounds to choose from, Sinclair says the online format doesn't diminish kids' enthusiasm and delight.
It's just Santa's calling, and the excitement jumps in just as much.
This holiday season, there's still moments of wonder and holiday cheer to be had, especially when Santa is just a click away. Tina Trin, VOA News, New York.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.